Good evening, everybody. My name is Brendan Shaw, and I'm the External Affairs Representative for Dominion Energy in Prince William County. I apologize for the technical delays here. For those of you that are just joining us or joining on the phone, the correct password is Dominion to get access to the presentation. So if you're interested in seeing the presentation and you're on the phone right now, please type in Dominion as that registration password. We're here this evening to discuss Possum Point Power Station and the removal of the coal ash at the facility. Thank you for joining us. We're going to walk through very quickly some of the participation keys because the purpose of the meeting this evening is to get some input from the public, and we do appreciate that feedback. We want to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the meeting. So as you see here on this slide, the audio will remain muted for attendees throughout the presentation. If you are participating on the web or a mobile app, the question and answer screen is open on the right. If you select all panelists, you can type in your question and we will all see it and answer it from there. We will do so verbally at the end of the meeting. If you are unable to use the web or mobile app and are accessing the meeting by calling the dial-in number and are not able to submit questions, please feel free by sending an email to me, Brendan, at BRENDON_E_Shaw at dominionenergy.com. That is BRENDON_E_SHAW at dominionenergy.com. This meeting is being recorded and we will post it on our website, and you all will be able to see it there. Thank you very much for your time. Again, thank you for joining us and apologize for the delay. And now I will turn it over to Spencer Adkins.
Thanks for joining us this evening to talk about our Possum Point CCR project. As we start going through the presentation, it's locked up. What can you see? I'm just a moment. The slides locked up. Brendan or Jennifer, can you look into that? The presentation seems to be locked. All right, thank you. So the first thing I want to cover before we get into the actual presentation itself and some of the details about why we're here tonight. Just wanted to talk a little bit about the company Dominion Energy's core values. We always want to sort of cover this whenever we do have these types of meetings. And as you can see, on the screen here, for those that have the ability to see it, our core ethics are safety, ethics, excellence, embrace change, and one Dominion Energy. And so just for the purpose of this discussion this evening, I'm going to pick one of them. I'm going to pick safety, just to cover a quick safety moment. Obviously, we are doing this meeting virtually for a couple of reasons. COVID is still something that all of us are dealing with, and hopefully someday we can move forward. But obviously, we're trying to do the right thing and stay distance and just use common sense to prevent the further spread of COVID. And also, it's a very wintry evening, a lot of snow and sleet, depending on where you are. So obviously, if you are out tonight, if you are at a remote location at the moment, you got to travel later. Just be careful. Again, it's going to get cold later, and at least as of right before the meeting, we were getting a lot of snow here in the Richmond area. So again, just try to take some precautions if you are going to be traveling tonight. So as we get into the presentation here, I thought we would start off with just a high-level aerial view of Possum Point Power Station. As you can see here, you can see the station itself off sort of to the bottom left, and off to the right, you can see our ponds, the coal ash ponds, A, B, C, D, and E. So this site had 5 coal ash ponds. We've already done work at 4 of those ponds, A, B, C, and E. That's what you're seeing in the screen here. That sort of looks like soil or dirt. That's where we have removed ash over the last several years, and we've consolidated all that into our Pond D, which at the moment you can see a little bit of water in this picture. So again, this is just a sort of an aerial view of the area that we're going to be talking about, the site. Just a little bit of quick history. Possum Point Station was the first unit was constructed in 1948, and over the years there's been 6 units constructed. 5 of those units have been retired. Unit 6 is still in operation. It's about 600 megawatts, and we also have some combustion turbines on site as well. So those are all natural gas fueled, and they're still in operation at the site. On the next slide, again, this is a little bit more of a closed-in view of the ponds, sort of from the opposite angle of what we were just showing you. You can see right at the bottom of the screen here is Pond E. E is an echo. It was a large pond, and again, all that ash has been consolidated up into Pond D, which is what you see at the top part of your screen. And so off to the right, upper right, that's where ponds A, B, and C were as well. And you can see most of the area is covered under gravel. So again, a lot of work's been done over the past several years to consolidate all the coal ash at this particular site into one large pond. And that one large pond, Pond D as in Delta, Pond D, that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So a little bit of background. A lot of folks on this call probably know this, or you've probably heard this before in some of our previous presentations. But back in 2019, Senate Bill 1355 was passed and made into law that basically required Dominion at the 4 sites that we have. We had to take the CCR material or the coal ash material, and we either have to take it to an on-site landfill, a lined landfill, or we have to remove the CCR material off of the site, take it to an off-site landfill, or take that CCR material and have it beneficially reused. So the bill provided some options, and you can see here the graphic on the right is just sort of a representation. You see Possum Point toward the top part or the northern part of Virginia, so that's what we're here to talk about tonight. But you can see some of the other sites listed there as well, that where we're going to be doing work, or we've already started some work at some of our other sites. Just real quickly, the requirements for us under this bill, again, as you can see here, for those that can see it, we, between the 4 sites, we have about 27 million cubic yards of ash. We have to beneficiate at least 6.8 million cubic yards of that, and it has to come from 2 different sites. We have to, any work that we do at these 4 sites, we have to utilize local workforce. If we do haul CCR materials away from the site, we have to develop a transportation plan in coordination with the localities, whether that's a county, city. We have to work that out in coordination with the localities. And then, of course, there's a cost recovery element to the law, and that's we have an annual cap over a 15-year time frame. So with that, so what you see on the screen here, and I'm going to spend a few minutes here. There's a lot of information to take in, but the biggest, the main reason that we're here tonight to talk about Possum Point, the CCR project, or to talk about the options that we are considering or have considered for disposal for the Possum Point site. So as I mentioned earlier, the law allows flexibility on either doing an on-site landfill or taking it off-site, and I'll get into some of those details in a minute. You take it off-site and take it to an off-site landfill, or take it to a beneficial reuse facility of some type. So what you see here, we've got the 4 possibilities, or the 4 types of options that was considered for the Possum Point site. I'll start with the on-site landfill. Basically with this particular option, and I've got some more details in terms of the maps that I'll show you later, but basically all the work's going to be done on our existing site. We're going to take some property right next to our current Pond D, and our desire would be to build a landfill next to that. And If we do that, then that means all the ash that is at Possum would stay in that landfill. The project would be approximately 8 years, including permitting and the construction itself. We would be doing a double liner system, and we do have some details on that I'll cover later as well on that. But we would be doing a brand new landfill that would obviously meet all DEQ, Department of Environmental Quality requirements. And so we feel pretty strongly that that would be a good system to have. And then you get down into some local permitting, obviously working with the county on the site plan, land disturbance permits, building permits, and those types of things. And of course, there's the environmental permitting with this option as well, getting a solid waste closure, getting a new solid waste new landfill permit, a minor air permit, just based on some equipment that we would be using at the site, and then a wetlands permit just based on where we're putting the landfill. So as you can see, in terms of impact, in terms of cost and permitting, we think this is a very attractive option. And again, we think this is the least impactful to the local neighborhood. And going through the other options, you can see the next column that we have is recycling approximately half of the ash at Possum Point, and then the remainder being taken off site by a truck. So if you get into that option, obviously, again, what we've learned over the past several years from getting proposals from different contractors is we think only about half of the ash is able to be used for beneficial reuse. So that's why you see these options sort of broken out this way. But if we did that, you would see about 100 trucks or so a day going in and out of the site, and then 200 rail cars per week to get rid of all that ash at the site. And that duration would be about 12 years. So you can see right off the bat, there's not only a cost, a pretty steep cost element here that would change, but you would also see transportation duration step up pretty sharply, in terms of how long we would be there doing the work. The most common beneficial use for CCR material or coal ash is cement replacement. That's taking the coal ash and taking it either to a cement kiln or processing it in a way that would be used in as a cement replacement, eventually making concrete. And then, as I mentioned, the remainder of that ash will be going to an off-site landfill. Again, we have some local permitting considerations, and then the big difference here when you get into environmental permit is if you have to do an on-site ash processing facility, now you're getting into what's considered a major air permit from an environmental standpoint, which is obviously a lot longer and it's just more complex getting those kinds of permits. The next option is very similar. The only difference is in this next case is recycling. Again, we're still only recycling half of the ash, but instead of taking it out by truck, you're taking it out by rail. So again, you can see the cost increase there as well. Basically, stepping up from trucks to rail now for the remainder of the ash, you have another step increase in cost. And again, you can see this would take again approximately 12 years to dispose of all the ash that's on the site. And again, very similar technology in terms of the beneficial use, the local permitting, environmental permitting. Very similar to the if you haul half of it out by truck. And then the very last option that we show here is complete rail, no trucking at all. If you just take all of this ash and you load it into a rail car system and you haul it off-site to an off-site landfill, basically, 0% of the ash is recycled. All of it goes to a landfill. Again, you're getting into that 200 plus rail cars per week. That probably we think about 10 years. You do have, again, we would be taking it to an off-site landfill that would be DEQ approved, of course. So there's some we have to ensure that we're meeting the requirements of meeting DEQ for taking it to a landfill. And then again, you have some local permitting and some environmental permitting. So the big takeaway, and again, I'll reiterate some of this toward the end of the presentation. The big takeaway here is, there's an on-site landfill, which we have gone on the record with the State Corporation Commission. Our original intent, our preference is to build an on-site landfill, but you can see the step increase in cost when you start going through some of these other options. So one question you may have, or you may be curious about, is if you do an on-site landfill, what does that look like? This graphic is just meant to represent, kind of what would it look like in comparison to the surrounding area, and essentially the Pond D final grading would be sort of lowered compared to what it is now for most of that pond. And you can see right next door where the proposed landfill would be. So again, this is all on Dominion property. Again, we have total control under this option of just having, the trucks stay on our property. Again, we think this is the least impactful option for the neighborhood. And so again, this is just kind of show you, big picture where the where the new landfill would go. And you can see some of the ancillary equipment that would be required, some water treatment equipment. You see some leachate storage tanks and things of that nature. So again, this is just kind of meant to show you, just to get a feel of where we would intend to build a landfill if we were able to do so going forward. All right, so I mentioned earlier, just kind of, again, trying to drill down a little bit here. Again, this is just another way of looking at the Pond D here that's existing. You can see the yellow dotted outline of that. And again, just to the left, you can see the red dotted outline of where this proposed landfill would be. And you can kind of see in green the proposed haul route. So again, all the truck stays on our property. You can see just below that where Possum Point Road, for those that live in that area, you can kind of see where Possum Point Road is. You can see where Cockpit Point Road is, and you can see the station as well. Just to kind of give you a graphic of what this option would look like. Now, this next option is what we're calling the off-site landfill option, assuming you would use trucks. As I mentioned earlier, we have gotten proposals to, if you're going to take it off-site and beneficially reuse it, you take some of it by train, take some of it by truck. You can see in green here where the truck route most likely would be as you come out Possum Point Road and head toward Interstate 95. You can see that if you go a little bit north up to Dumfries Road, you can pick up 95 there, or you could come south and pick up 95 there as well. Again, this is just to show or represent possible truck routes in the event that we were to haul off the ash using trucks. Again, you would come off of our site at Possum Point Road and head out to Route 1. And then, like I said, either go north or south to pick up Interstate 95, depending on where they would take it. This next option that we're looking at here, the off-site landfill option, this is a combination of rail and truck. Again, as keeping in with one of the options that we were looking at earlier, you would obviously need the trucks to haul off or haul it over to an unloading facility or an offloading facility next to our station. We would have to construct a rail loadout facility there, and then do some modifications to the rail line itself, some construction associated with that. But ultimately, you could load it onto a rail car system, and then you can see here the rail line as it, most likely we think this ash would probably go south, but it could go in either direction. But for the representative on this picture, it's just showing it going south. And so this kind of, you got some trucking on Possum Point Road and Cockpit Point Road as it takes it over to our station, and then again loaded into a rail load system. That kind of shows you it headed down toward the Quantico area on the rail system there. All right, so I mentioned earlier about our proposal, for doing the on-site landfill system here at Possum. Most landfill designs have what's called a single liner system, and you can see in this graphic here represents a double liner system. So we're, we understand that there's a lot of questions around, the integrity of these systems. So for this particular landfill, what we have offered is, a double liner system, which we feel, is extremely robust. And so you can, for those on the line that may know a lot about these kinds of systems, I think you can see right away, we're going the extra mile here, taking the next step to make sure that there's no issues with our landfill. So just wanted everyone on the call to understand that and get a feel that, we're not just doing the minimum here, we're doing above and beyond what would be normally required for a landfill of this type. All right, so this is the last slide, and I think in a few minutes we'll dive in here to some Q&A, but just a kind of a summarization of some of the material that we've covered. Obviously, from Dominion's perspective, the on-site landfill is the recommended option. Overwhelmingly, it's the lowest cost to our customers. It's got the shortest construction duration, minimizes noise, fugitive dust impacts. As we're moving the ash, there's going to be equipment on the site regardless of where we take the ash. But again, having a shorter duration certainly minimizes those types of impacts. Minimizes truck traffic to local neighborhood. Of course, under this scenario, under the on-site landfill, we're not going to be hauling ash off the site. It's all going to stay on our site under the new landfill. So, but there will be trucks needed to transport equipment, material, soil, and other types of items that are going to be needed to do the construction, equipment delivery, material delivery, those types of things at the site. So obviously there's going to be trucks coming in and out, which is normal, but again, not moving CCR material in the trucks. Just a point that I wanted to make as well before we finish out the slides. I mentioned earlier there were originally 5 coal ash ponds at Possum Point, and we've already removed ash from A, B, C, and E, and we've combined that or consolidated that into Pond D. And so we did that with no impacts to the local neighborhood. We, again, we had trucks coming in with soil, we had trucks coming in with material. We had a lot of inspections by the county, a lot of inspections by the state. And again, we did that work with little or no impacts to the local neighborhood. Again, by having this on-site landfill option, Dominion's responsible. We're going to be responsible for the closure, the post-closure activities. Once the work's done, there's going to be periodic inspections that are going to be required by the DEQ. So obviously we have to ensure that those inspections are done on time and that we meet all the DEQ requirements. And finally, I'll say this with, us moving the ash out of Pond D into the new landfill, and we've already moved ash from ponds A, B, C, and E. There may be an opportunity to work with the county as far as, some land use options after this work is done, within reason. I mean, once we do this work, there's still for years to come, with even in the areas where we've removed the ash, Dominion's still going to have to do certain inspections and ensure that the DEQ is satisfied that we've done the right thing in terms of moving that ash. But again, I think we're open to having those discussions for some potential long use options. So I think that's pretty much the presentation. And so I'm sure there's probably been a few Q&A trickle in. So I'm gonna stop right here for a moment, and I'm gonna turn it back over to Brendan, and he's gonna kind of go through some of our Q&A, and then we'll take turns trying to answer some of those questions.
Thank you, Spencer, and thank you to everybody that submitted questions. We do have several to go through here, as well as some items to acknowledge from emails that were sent prior to the meeting. Spencer, one of the questions that was asked is about the different costs that we've received for the different options. Could you talk about where those numbers have come from, the process that we used to get there, and then also why there's such a significant difference between each of the options?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a good question. I mean, so prior to Senate Bill 1355, which again became law in 2019, we had actually gone through two previous Senate bills. Back in 2017, we had gone through Senate Bill 1398, and in 2018 we had gone through Senate Bill 807, and then of course we got Senate Bill 1355. But those two Senate bills prior to 1355 required us to go out and get quotes and proposals for looking at different ways to handle our ash, whether we recycled it or beneficial use is another way to say that, or if we were going to build landfills or take it to offsite landfills. So we actually got through that process over those two and a half years or so. We got a lot of good proposals and we got some good feedback in terms of what that looks like. And so we do have some credibility, obviously, to these numbers. The landfill option, again, was based on an estimate that we had a contractor input for. So we kind of have an idea of what the landfill cost would be. And then these other options would be, again, based on proposals that we received. So we feel pretty confident in these numbers. Now, some of the proposals were, provided a year, 2-3 years ago, and we've tried to make sure we brought those into today's dollars. But we've got quite a bit of data behind those numbers to show the cost. And the reason those costs jump up is when you start adding transportation. So I think if you look through those options, building an on-site landfill, again, you're contained, everything's on site. It's still a lot of money, about $350 million or so. But once you start adding a lot of trucks and you start transporting that ash long distance, or you add trains and you start transferring it even longer distances, those transportation costs add up very quickly. And that's basically it. And then plus you have to build some, as I mentioned earlier, some offloading facilities associated with the rail, and so there's different components of construction that you'll have to deal with that you would not have to deal with if you did an on-site landfill. So but by far the biggest component is just the transportation itself. And if you take it to an off-site landfill, there's also fees that these landfill companies charge you. So by the ton or whatever, they're going to charge you basically to bring that on top of the transportation. They're going to charge you a cost just to store that stuff on their landfill.
Thank you, Spencer. And then in line with the conversation about costs, we have a cost or a question about costs. How are those costs recoverable for the company?
Well, again, presumably the Senate Bill 1355 allows us the recovery mechanism for these options. Obviously, again, as I mentioned earlier, we have already portrayed to the State Corporation Commission that our preferred option is to do an on-site landfill. You start looking at these other options, it's again a step change, quite a bit of difference in those costs. But our intent, as the Senate Bill 1355 law allows us, it does allow us to recover our costs for this work.
Thank you, Spencer. The next question here was about trucks. They were asking about the route that trucks would use for transit, although you did cover some of that in the presentation. But along those lines, some of the emails that we received prior to the meeting were related to safety protocols that we had in place at Possum Point, and how we interacted with various safety agencies in the event that there was an accident in Possum Point Road. And could you talk a little bit about that communication and sort of the protocols that we have in place?
Sure. So I know one thing I mentioned earlier was if we were going to haul ash off of the site, we would the law requires us to develop a transportation plan in coordination with the local county. In this case, Prince William County. In other cases, it might be with a local city, but in this case, it would be Prince William County. As part of that transportation plan, we would also develop a traffic management plan that, where if we're going to have trucks on these roads, managing that traffic, making sure it's handled safely, making sure that we notify local agencies, whether it's the local, well, we start off with VDOT. Obviously, VDOT would weigh in on our traffic management plan, but then we would also work with, as the station operates today, they work with the local, fire departments, local police, local, emergency services. Our project would be doing the same thing. We would be working with the local services, alerting everyone to what we would be doing. If we were doing this particular option, and I've got the truck route back up so people can kind of get a visual of that. If we were going to do this route, if we were going to do this option, I'm sorry, I meant to say, if we were going to do this option, we would absolutely, have to work with the local services to ensure that people are well aware of when we would be moving ash, what time during the day, when we would start, when we would end, and again, how we are going to control traffic, whether it's with temporary lights, flag people, or combinations of that. That's how we would do this long term.
Great, thank you, Spencer. The next question I have here is about the landfill. Could you talk a little bit about the landfill leachate monitoring and some of the reporting requirements? I know you briefly touched on that in one of the final slides.
So yeah, I think the So obviously, this graphic just kind of shows what a collection aggregate layer underneath our cover. This is just showing the liner system, but we would have a cover on top of this. But we would collect this leachate and we would have to monitor that. So again, that would be a DEQ approved system. DEQ would require us to periodically check this leachate. We would probably have to put it through some kind of treatment system as part of our water treatment. On another slide earlier, I was talking about a water treatment system. So we would be required. We would absolutely be required to live up to the DEQ requirements. As far as how we collect the leachate, how we monitor it, and how we treat it, and how we release it once it's treated. So all that would be regulated by DEQ through our permitting process.
Thank you, Spencer. This one is related to siting of the landfill. Has the company reviewed further on-site landfill consolidation methods to either push the new landfill boundary away from the water or have a less of an impact on the total acreage?
So, yeah, so that's a good question. Obviously, we're trying to put this new landfill, within our property boundary. So our property boundary, we do have some ability to move it north, but you start getting terrain issues, and again, the transportation from Pondy over to this new landfill. I think with the considerations, that we've done some basic borings around this property, and this is, we thought this was a good design. That's something we can take away. Brendan, we can certainly look at that and think about that in the future. Again, we've done some preliminary design work, but that's something we can take away from this and look at. But again, I know we've done some preliminary borings. We've looked at the terrain. We've looked at, how well the property is situated. And I think, where we have it is probably, with the amount of ash that we have to move, we think this is probably the right spot, but that's something we can certainly look into.
Thank you, Spencer. The next question is about the ash that's currently located in Pond D. Could we talk a little bit about the dewatering process and how that ash would be moved to a landfill?
Sure, no problem. So what would happen is, presumably, as that ash is removed, you're going to be, first of all, we would go out and this water, like in this picture, we would take that water. And again, I've mentioned this a couple of times. We will have to have a water treatment system, and we will have to treat any water that touches the coal ash or the CCR material. That's, directive number one. Anything that touches the coal ash, we are going to have to treat it. So all that water you see on top, that'll all be treated. So what we would plan to do is start taking that water, removing it, put it through a treatment system, and then we would start excavating down into this pond and to remove it, to take it over to the landfill. So once you start that process, there is going to be some water in the coal ash that's going to naturally dewater. So you're going to have some of that water come out, but we also have different options. We can put what's called well point systems, where you put little wells down into the coal ash and you suction out the water and get it down to a point so that when you do excavate it, it's manageable. So there's different techniques on doing that we've used before. We did some of that when we moved the ash out of A, B, C, and E. We've done that at some of our other sites. It's a fairly common practice throughout the coal ash industry. But all of that water, any of that water that touches coal ash, will have to go through our water treatment system.
And Spencer, how long do we estimate that process to take?
So if it's the on-site landfill option, again, I think I mentioned, we're probably looking at a year or two of permitting, going through DEQ, getting the solid waste permit and things of that nature in order to build this landfill. In terms of actual construction time, we're estimating right now anywhere, around 6, maybe 7 years of actual work. Again, prior to moving the ash, we're going to be building the water treatment under this scenario, building the water treatment system, with the leachate system, or leachate treatment system. There'll be some other ancillary equipment that we'll have to build around the site on our property. But again, all that's enclosed on our property. So, again, duration total, we were saying about 8 years, and about 6 of that would be actual construction, excavation of the ash.
Then Spencer, I have a question here about whether or not there's been any recycling on site to date.
So to my knowledge, no. I mean, as part of our project, no. We haven't taken any ash from Pond D to be recycled. And as I mentioned earlier, we did go through a process, I guess a couple of years ago, or about a year and a half ago, of looking at potentially recycling some of the ash at Possum Point. And based on some of the CCR data that we have for that pond, the bids that we received, they thought at best probably about half of the ash could be recycled. So again, if you're going to try to recycle this ash, at best half, and it's not all going to be sort of in one spot. It'll be sporadic throughout this pond. It'll be, it would be a long process if you were trying to recycle that ash. It'll be, like I said, I think we said about 12-year process long term if you're going to go through that process.
Great, Spencer. And then we have several questions here related to safety. There's some concerns about the proximity to nearby communities. Could we talk a little bit about how we're sure that these options are safe, and what we're doing to ensure the well-being of the nearby community?
Absolutely. So again, as far as the landfill itself, again, we have offered, and we would do what we're calling the double liner system. So I think from a solid waste perspective or a landfill perspective, that is top of the line. I mean, that is a very, very robust system. We feel very confident we won't have any issues with our landfill itself. Now, when we're doing construction, there's noise, there's fugitive dust, those things. We will, obviously, the county has requirements. We will work with the county to make sure that we're meeting all those requirements. There's going to be requirements from the DEQ on how we handle fugitive dust. We're going to do things to limit any impacts coming off of our site and to the surrounding neighborhood. Again, I'll just point out, we've just done a lot of that similar type work at ponds A, B, C, and E over the past several years. without an incident. So I feel very confident that we could do the same thing as we're doing this work for Pond D.
Spencer, just to follow up on some of these safety items, we have a question here about how do we prepare for catastrophic weather events and how might a landfill be impacted by those?
So a catastrophic event such as what, Brendan? I'm sorry.
Catastrophic weather events like a hurricane, for example.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So that's again another great question, and we've actually had to deal with that at our CCR sites over the past several years. So we basically ensure that when we're doing this type of work, we obviously have to put in erosion and sediment control systems, whether that's a super silt fence or some other type of system that surrounds any work areas that we have open. So if we do get a lot of rain, it will be contained on our site. So obviously we have to implement those systems. We've implemented those systems over the years at some of our other sites, and at times we've had to enhance those systems as a result of some of these storms. We've had to again, there's going to be a requirement from the county to meet certain standards. We're gonna meet those standards. We're going to in some cases exceed those standards, but for those types of storms, we have procedures and protocols in place. Just like the station, Possum Point Station, or any of our other stations, whenever we have catastrophic events, we sort of button up the site, make sure there's no issues, and of course if we do have an issue of some type, making sure we work with the local agencies as required. Any kind of emergency situations, we want to make sure that we're able to make any potential repairs or anything like that if anything should happen. So obviously we're big on planning, so we try to make sure we have a good plan in place before any of those things happen.
Thanks, Spencer. And then along those same lines, there's concerns about landfills eventually leaking and what the timeline of the landfill liner looks like. Could you talk about those items a little bit?
Yeah, so good question. I mean, again, and that's why in this case we're offering to do a double liner. I know I've mentioned that a couple times now. So to ensure that we don't have any of those types of issues, at a landfill. I know there's various landfills all around. There's some in Prince William County. There's all various other counties within Virginia and around the United States. But again, that's why we're doing this double liner system here. And as far as the longevity, I think was part of your question. We've looked into that. We've got some scientific what they call white papers that's been done, and based on the resins and different things that are used for these liner systems, these liner systems typically good for 400 years or longer, 400 or 500 years, and they keep getting better, with the types of systems that they have in place. So again, we think with what we're doing here, we're going above and beyond, and we don't think we're going to have those types of issues. And I'll just say this, we Dominion, when we do move this ash, we're going to be on the hook here. It's not like we're going to, move the ash, cover it, and walk away. We've still got inspections. The DEQ permitting process is going to require that we constantly, do these inspections and report back to them if there's any issues. So again, Dominion will have full responsibility, forever and ever. So it's something we're going to always maintain.
Spencer, could you talk a little bit about the topography what the topography of a future landfill might look like?
Yeah, let me look. It's hard to see here. You can see the landfill. If you can see, the peak is about 190 feet. You can see that the Pond D, which currently is, it looks like a pond. In this case, we're going to be taking down some of those berms, and it's going to kind of just gradually, go from a peak of about 185 feet. You can see down at the bottom there, it's like 40 something feet, or down even lower as you get down toward possible. It's just going to gradually slope off once we're said and done with Pond D. But to the landfill itself, you can kind of see it's almost not quite a pyramid shape, but kind of, sort of. And you can see a peak of about 190 feet above grade. And that is, we've been out to the site, and it's comparable to the area. I think if you were to drive by on Possum Point Road, you're just going to see a grass. You're just going to look up and you'll see a grassy type area, and it's not really based on what we're planning. We're trying to make it blend in with the area. So I think people, once we get done with this, people won't even realize. They'll just think it's a small mountain or a hill with grass growing. But you can kind of see the topography. You're still over the sloping grade as it comes off and goes down to Possum Point Road. And again, this is in our design phase. We're still in the design phase with this.
Spencer, another question kind of along those lines.
Yep.
I believe it will occur here in the near future, but have any environmental impact assessments been performed on each option?
So we looked at, I mentioned earlier on some of these options. Whoops. We know, for example, looking at the environmental permitting section here, again, with the on-site landfill option, we're going to need a wetlands permit. We've done some preliminary studies that we know what that looks like. We think it's a minor air permit, again, based on the equipment that we're going to be using, as opposed to if we recycle this ash. I think you're looking at major air permits for the processing facility, and so I think we're going to continue to, again, monitor the landfill. If as we go further into this, if we're to proceed with this on-site landfill, Brendan, we will do more of those kinds of studies to ensure, again, the DEQ at the end of the day, it's all, we have to meet the permit requirements. So we think that meeting the permit or exceeding the permit is not going to be a problem. I meant to say, we're going to be able to get into, I think, working with DEQ if we choose this option. So I don't, in terms of environmental impacts, again, there'll be some minor air permits, wetlands permit, which is fairly common for these kinds of installations. But again, from our perspective, it's the least impactful, overall.
Thank you, Spencer. I also have a question here about
Sure.
Input, and I will take this one. The question is, have we spoke directly to residents? The answer to that is, this has been the first community meeting, obviously, that we've hosted. We appreciate those that have been able to attend. Again, this information is going to be available through our website. And for those that were unable to have a question answered, or maybe think of some additional questions after we're finished, I'd encourage you to send an email to me. That email is available in the letter that many residents received. If you were not one of the residents that received those letters, my email is BRENDON.SHAW@dominionenergy.com. Our team will review all of those comments and share them with the county. There will also be several additional opportunities to provide input as we move through the county process. There will also be an opportunity to send it during some of the different regulatory processes that Spencer just mentioned. And then the last thing I wanted to mention, for those that might not be as comfortable with the technology or might just prefer to send a hard copy letter, you are welcome to send that letter. There is a return address on the letter that went out. That is 3072 Centerville Road, Herndon, Virginia. That is my office address. We can collect input there as well, and that will also be shared with our team and the county. Spencer, there was a question here about the amount of ash that is untreated and in Pond D. Could you briefly touch on that?
Yeah, so at the moment, and I put the slide back up, but for those that can't see it, we at Possum Point, we have approximately 4 million cubic yards of ash that's accumulated over the years. So as I mentioned earlier, I mean, the unit one, or the original site installation was 1948. So over the decades, obviously more units have been built, and then they've all been most of them have been retired, as I mentioned earlier. We do not obviously no longer burn coal at this facility, but yeah, we have about 4 million cubic yards of ash in pond at Pond D at the moment, Brendan. I'll say approximately. You know, we've done a lot of borings at Pond D to ensure that we have a good handle on the amount. You might find pockets as we start excavating. It's possible we find a small pocket here or there that maybe more or less, but we're pretty confident it's about 4 million cubic yards based on all the data that we have.
And Spencer, how many acres would the new on-site landfill be compared to the existing acreage of Pond D? And is there a reason that we can't retrofit Pond D into a landfill?
So that's a good question. I'll take the latter part first. The Pond D currently, you know, with the new law basically says you have to remove it. And the law says you have to either take it to a new on-site landfill or take it to an off-site landfill. So really to retrofit it, you'd have to remove all the ash out and then somehow go back, you know, temporarily store it and then build, you know, a system and then pull it back. So really you'd be doing double the work. You know, the cost again really wouldn't, you know, be feasible at that point. So that's why, you know, in our opinion, building a landfill right next door to the pond is probably, you know, the most cost efficient option.
Spencer, and then there's a question here about the distance between the proposed landfill and the nearest residence. Do we have that information offhand, or is that something that we can follow up on?
We can certainly follow up on it. You know, I'm trying to show, let me see here. That doesn't really show it. The nearest residence, yeah, we can go back and look at that. I want to, yeah, I mean, it's probably between a half mile and a mile, probably a mile, maybe a little less than a mile. Yeah, and so I think it's probably in the ballpark, but we can certainly find that out.
Okay, we can follow up on that.
Yeah.
Do we foresee any issues with the bombing at Quantico affecting the integrity of the liner?
I'm sorry, what was that? Can you read that again, please?
The question was whether or not any bombing at Quantico, any of the practice bombing that goes on over there might impact the integrity of the liner.
Yeah, no, we don't. When you asked me the question, I thought Quantico was being bombed or something. No, so no, the exercise things that they do there, no, that we don't think that would have any impact. I mean, again, we have an operating station that's been there since the 40s. We've had the other ash ponds that were there for several decades, and so all we're doing really now is just putting it into a lined landfill with this particular option. So we don't see any options, or I'm sorry, any issues related to that option.
Okay, and then there's a question about should the ash be taken off site and recycled? Where might that happen? Do we know what that is?
So when we got the proposals, we got proposals from several different companies, and they're taking it in several different directions. So some companies were proposing to take it to South Carolina. Some companies were taking it to Pennsylvania. Some were taking it to New Jersey, New York. So you know, and they're even further south than South Carolina. Some were even proposing to take it to Florida. So, you know, it's all over. These recycling type places or beneficial use places, they're scattered throughout the whole United States, and we got proposals going in basically both directions. So there's no single place, and depending on the type of application and what they're wanting to use the ash for, it's just basically, Brendan, it could be anywhere on the eastern seaboard, basically.
Okay, great. Spencer, I'm going to address one item that's coming up,
Sure.
And then we would give Supervisor Bailey, who represents the facility, the opportunity to give some closing remarks. There's several questions on here about some well surveying and sampling that the company's done in recent years. Just to touch on this very briefly, this is entirely separate from the project that we're discussing this evening. The company did complete these surveys and samples at the request of the General Assembly. Fortunately, there was only a handful of issues that occurred. Those were about a mile away from the facility and up gradient from the facility, so at a higher elevation. So we don't have any reason to believe that that has anything to do with Possum Point, but we are working with residents to address those issues as required by the General Assembly legislation. And for those that are asking for additional information on that process and those results are available through the Virginia DEQ, that is the Department of Environmental Quality website. So with that being said, it looks like we do have Supervisor Bailey with us. Supervisor Bailey, if you want to go ahead and share some thoughts, the floor is yours.
There we go. There we go. Thank you so much, Brendan. I appreciate it. Thank you to Dominion for presenting tonight and having this this dialogue with our citizens. I just wanted to make sure that everyone had an opportunity to look at the presentation and to digest it. And if you did not, as Brendan said, that it would be located on their website, and I'll be able to share it, I'm sure, on mine as well, just so that you can get to that readily as well. I wanted to, Spence, it's good seeing you. Thank you for your presentation.
Anytime, Supervisor.
And I wanted to also say that we are going to be developing a task force to be the community face for this project. And if you are interested in participating in that task force, please go in on my website and send us a comment and with your name and number to the website on the Potomac website, so that we can communicate with you and make you a part of this community opportunity. We apologize for the difficulties. I know Dominion was trying its best to get it up and running. There will be other opportunities, I'm sure, when I get with them and talk, that we will come back to you and have everything ironed out. As Brendan has said, you know, it took us about a year to come together and to make this happen. And because we wanted to make sure that we had succinct and detailed information to share with the community. I want you to know, as a community and as your supervisor, your voice will be heard totally. And in my communications, not only with you, but also with Dominion. And so without further ado, Brendan, thank you so much, you and your team, for all that you've done. I'm sure that this is more than fun for you, but I know that you're working diligently to come up with the right conclusion to this problem. And again, as everyone knows in the district, to create a win-win situation, specifically for the citizens. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Supervisor. We appreciate you joining us this evening, and we appreciate you working with us over the past several years on this project. Spencer, any closing thoughts?
No, it looks like it's about 700 feet to the nearest house. Followed up on a question earlier, about 700-800 feet. So we'll go with that. We'll continue to look up on it, but I was just Kevin was just showing me it looks like we're about 700 feet, but we'll confirm that. Just to follow up on an earlier question, but I don't have anything else, and I appreciate everybody's help with this. Supervisor Bailey, good to see you again, and appreciate those comments. And Brendan, I'll turn it back over to you.
Great. Well, just a reminder again, if there's any additional thoughts, please send me an email. Please reach out to your supervisor. Please feel free to send mail. You know, we want to be a partner in this process, and we look forward to receiving input from the community as we continue to move forward. Take care, everybody. Be safe. I hope you have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.